Yes.
The figure that just came out a few minutes ago, that we've had a slight reduction in our...
Anything that we can do to improve our balance of payments is good news. And one of the most important things we've done in recent years is to increase farm exports. Last year, we more than doubled farm credits available for export. And as I said, last year we broke a record. This year we're going to break that record again. And one of the reasons that those latest figures show improvement is because of rising farm exports. It is also the case that we are importing, thankfully, slightly less foreign oil than we did before. It's partly as a result of Alaskan oil and so on, but that is also helping. But we have not solved America's trade problems yet. And that's one of the reasons we're working so hard at the multilateral trade negotiation talks in Geneva. We're pushing for the liberalization of markets for American farmers in Europe, Japan, and elsewhere, where in many commodities, for example, beef and so on, it's almost impossible to sell American products, even though our products are cheaper and better than those many times consumed by the citizens of those countries. So while we're pleased by that trade figure, there's no way that we can be satisfied with it. When we assumed office, we had a very serious situation in agriculture. Farm income was down at disastrous level. Farmers were afraid of losing their farms. We had very serious and high overhanging surpluses, which depressed prices. The cattle market was totally demoralized. We had no significant farm program to deal with any of the problems, and the farm strike movement was a reflection of the fever and desperation that was felt around the country. There is no automatic, mechanical way of solving that problem. And we've taken several steps, and the wisdom of those steps are now beginning to, I think, be seen by all farmers. We passed the 1977 Farm Act. We set aside production of corn and wheat, feed grains. We increased the minimum price support levels for dairy products, for feed grains. We removed the old historic allotments, which was a complex and mind-boggling and bureaucratic interference with farming. Just got rid of it. And we now make direct commodity payments on all production, not those old allotments. And we've done many things to help farmers. One of the most important things we did was to move toward a farmer-held reserve system. Instead of having big government storage of surplus commodities that could be dumped on the market, we now have a system which is new, by which farmers can hold wheat and feed grains on their own land under storage, which they control for 3 years. Before it used to be 1 year. This has greatly improved farm bargaining power, control over reserve stocks, and has had a big impact in improving not only the markets but the psychology of the farmers. And I think all of these things have contributed to a much better mood in rural America. I won't say it's perfect yet, but we're working on it. We abhor what's happening to the dissidents, including Mr. Sharansky. We think the Helsinki Accords guarantee the right of dissidents to criticize their own government. We think it's a basic human right. We tried everything we could in private and then later in public to prevent it. We regret it. We don't think it's in Russia's interest, and we cannot accept that sort of thing silently. If we're silent, we approve that sort of abuse of human rights. We've taken several steps. We've canceled several scheduled visits to the Soviet Union to express our displeasure. We have canceled the sale of a major computer that they wanted. We have added oil technology to the licensing roster so that these commodities will be reviewed. And all of this to disclose our displeasure. But we have to admit there are limits on what we can do to impose our will on another country. And we think we've expressed ourselves. If there are other steps, we may have to do other things. And we've got to be careful not to, we have to be careful to pursue balance. For example, some people have said we ought to put restrictions on the export of American wheat and other feed grains to Russia. I think that's a mistake. That helps us. It's a good producer of earnings for us. It takes hard currency from the Soviet Union they could use for other purposes, but which instead they use for food. You can't kill people with grain and with corn and with wheat. I think it's the sort of thing that we should be doing. What Andy was trying to say, I believe, was a reference to some of the problems which the civil rights workers had some years ago. I regret that in his first statement it didn't come out that way. I don't believe there's any comparison between the treatment of dissidents in our country and in the Soviet Union. And Andy Young the next day was very clear in saying, I did not in any way intend to imply that. We have a system that permits boisterous political dissent. Anybody who holds high public office realizes that it's almost a national sport, and it's cheaper than football tickets to lay on your public officers as part of the fun of the whole thing. And insofar as that it was taken to mean that, we cannot accept it and do not accept it. And I don't think that's what Andy meant. But I must say the language was inartful.
Well, first of all, although I'm disappointed in what happened, that's certainly not the end of it. This is a demonstration of the kind of rottenness in the party machinery, and this is what I'm out to try to help break up. And the fight isn't over. That is just the preliminary hearing, I would say. It's not ending there at all. I fully expect to be on the ballot.
How do you plan to do that?
Well, by whatever means is legal. The only recourse that I know at the moment is to go into circuit court, and we're prepared to do that.
You mentioned the rottenness of the party machinery. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Well, it's obvious that that no fairness, no decisions are made on the basis of facts. The ruling they made was based on their judgment of why a person lives where one lives, when the law speaks to whether or not a person lives, or not why. It's a person's prerogative to live where he wants to live.
Why do you think this type of challenge was brought up in the first place?
Why do I think it was? Simply because the incumbent representative from District 80 hates to face Herman Harris on the ballot because he realizes that when this happens, District 80 is going to have a new representative in the legislature next January, and in order to avoid this, out of desperation, they have their hatchet men out to get me. It's going to help me tremendously in the end.
How does that?
How is it? It's going to make my people, it is already making my supporters more determined now that we're going to win this election.
The reason being, of course, that it was not anything but a technical violation. If I may explain to you what the violation or the supposed violation was, is the fact, number one, I had filed with the Secretary of State on time and, in fact, 1 day early. The only thing that I was challenged on is that the various probate judges in the 2 counties involved did not receive a copy of those particular filings with the Secretary of State within a 5-day period. And that's all the challenge was about.
Is there any malice or hard feelings as to what happened and what you had to go through?
Oh, absolutely not. As I say, it was a political maneuver, and I'm appreciative of that, but there's certainly no malice or hard feelings.
What now? How's the campaign going to go?
I think it's going to go well for us. I was real pleased that we were considered such a major competition that somebody would challenge me. So for that reason, I'm very happy, and the campaign's going well.
Investigators say the car was on the street in front of the mayor's house around midnight when someone shot a 12-gauge shotgun with double-aught buckshot into the front hood and windshield. The shot produced at least 11 bullet holes in the car. But besides that information, Police Chief Charles Swindle says very little is known about the incident.
It is under investigation this morning by the police department. We have no leads as to who done it. We may never have any, but we are actively investigating at the present time. We have the wad and stuff like this that came out of the shotgun shell. And fortunately, the mayor wasn't anywhere around his car. As you know, what could have happened?
Do you have any indication why somebody would have done it?
We have no idea as to why anybody would do this thing at the present time.
How is the investigation going now? What exactly are you doing?
Well, we have the lab people working on the car to determine maybe the brand name of the shots, things of this nature, that's taking the usual course.
Police lab men were searching the car this morning, trying to find traces of the buckshot. One investigator said the shot will help determine the make of the shell used. If that can be determined, he said, it may be possible to trace the person who purchased the shell. But he adds that possibility is slight. This is Dave Rickey, WSFA TV News, reporting.
Lieutenant Governor Jerry Beasley said he will seek to have the Senate relax its rules in order to pass the package proposed by Governor George Wallace in this special session of the legislature.
Is to work 5 consecutive days starting today, and to work without pay for the entire special session. And thirdly, to set definite times to consider all legislation, and if they fail to do that, to give the presiding officer of the Senate the right to call bills whenever he sees fit. And the fourth thing is to consider all bills that are included in Governor Wallace's call for the special session without debate, limiting debate to either 3 or 4 hours and no more. Now, if this is done by the Senate, in my opinion, this will expedite the special session, will allow all bills to be considered, and the bills that should be passed will be passed, and the bills that should be defeated will be defeated. And so if the Senate fails to set definite times and also fails to meet consecutive days and will consider the bills without extended debate, then I'll be forced into a position to use the gavel to at least get bills up to a vote. And I realize that this is not the way that the parliamentary process is supposed to work.
Beasley says he will ask the Senate to abolish the 5 p.m. work stoppage rule once and for all. He predicted that the tone of the session will be established by 6 p.m. today, and we should know by then what legislation will pass in this special session. Further, he predicted that the session would end at midnight on Friday or at the latest noon Saturday. The legislature convenes at 4 p.m. this afternoon. Governor Wallace will address a joint session at 6:30. It will be carried live on WSFA TV. Reporting from the state capitol, George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
There were special showings of the program Born Innocent at station KRON in San Francisco for reporters who will be covering the trial when it begins today. It's the story of a runaway girl, jailed and then sexually assaulted by other female inmates. 4 days later on this San Francisco beach, 9-year-old Olivia Nemi was sexually assaulted by 3 girls, with a young boy operating as a lookout. Olivia Nemi's mother contends the idea for that attack came from the program Born Innocent. She is suing NBC and its San Francisco affiliate KRON for $11 million. The attorney for the Nemi family is Marvin Lewis. He says the showing of the rape scene by NBC was negligent.
It's instructive, it's graphic, and it's disgusting. And in my opinion, the plot could have been told without getting down into the gutter and showing and bringing this type of a scene into the homes of America.
But attorneys for NBC say this is a First Amendment case, that freedom of expression is threatened. CBS and ABC have backed this NBC contention. Attorney Floyd Abrams says the quality of television could be hurt by the outcome of this case.
What I fear is that a loss in this case will necessarily lead to a kind of blandness, a kind of avoidance of television dealing with hard and real and poignant social problems. NBC tried something a lot better than is often the fare that we see on network television when it showed Born Innocent.
The Born Innocent trial begins today, nearly 4 years after that television program was first shown and after that sexual attack on this beach. Of the attackers, 1 girl served 3 years in a juvenile detention home. The 2 other girls and the boy were put on probation. Rick Davis, NBC News, San Francisco.
The priorities that I would like to set for considering the legislation would be to pass the education budget as quickly as possible, to then take up Governor Wallace's tax relief bills, which I personally believe are a great improvement over the Farm Bureau package that has been tossed around in this chamber for several sessions. The third priority that I'd like to see set for this session would be the passage of the TVA bill, which does not affect any county outside of the county served by TVA. And while some might oppose this bill, I would hope that both houses would at least give the bill an opportunity to be considered. If this is not done, this will be doing a great number of people in the northern sector of this state a great disservice. I would also like to see the priorities set to include the bond issue for education, because over the past several months, I've probably seen more of Alabama than any person in the history of this state. I've worked from 5 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, 6 days a week. And I've talked to a great number of persons. And a lot of people in this state that I've talked to, I would say when education is mentioned, one of the first things they say is, why don't you and others in state government, from the governor down through the ranks to the legislature, why don't you provide monies to do something about the deplorable conditions that exist in the public schools of this state? I would also like to see the bond issue for prison construction passed into law, and I would like to see the legislature consider the bill and pass it into law for funding properly the Department of Pensions and Security. And while this is not necessarily the final, or really the thing that should be done here, it's going to have to be done because of the time factor. And I think that in the future we're going to have to take a very close look at this department to make sure that we're getting a maximum return at the Montgomery level for the dollars we spend. I would also like to see the legislature consider the tuition grant bill as a part of the priorities that I've set here today.
The AEA supports Governor Wallace's tax relief plan because it does something for the homeowners and the small farmers of this state. This is something that the so-called lid bill in the past has never done, because it has always been aimed at helping big landed interests. This is why we have opposed such legislation in the past. Governor Wallace has now proposed a reasonable, effective tax relief plan for the homeowner and the small farmer. AEA had hoped for this type legislation throughout the so-called lid bill fight. We commend Governor Wallace for his deliberate work on this piece of legislation, and we call on the legislature to adopt it forthwith. Local school systems and county and city governing the millage rate so that there will be no loss. If we get the budget caught in a logjam, we could very well see schools not opening in many counties and cities. And of course, as you know, some of them are scheduled to open, I believe, as early as August the 14th, which is only about 2 weeks away now. So any kind of hostage holding of the budget, I think, would be very ill-advised, and I would hope the legislature would not get into that.
Charlie, are you crazy or something?
Sometimes. Feel that way.
Have you, well, let's see, you ran, what, total it all up, 9.5 miles?
Something like that, yeah. Saturday
And then
morning.
you played tennis. How far you think you ran in a tennis match?
Oh, about that far again. Had a good partner, but he was feeling bad too.
It was hot too, wasn't it?
Pretty much, about 95 something.
How'd you feel in the afternoon?
Pretty bad.
Have you often done this?
Yeah, well, when I was in better shape, I did it a lot, but right now I'm not really in good shape.
Did you tell Lester that you'd run 2 races or run over 9 miles?
He was there watching.
Oh, he was?
He was resting and watching.
Did your opponents know that you would...
They tried to hit every ball they could to me. That's pretty quick. I didn't feel. I hit some. I surprised them every now and then.
How much running do you do?
It varies, 4 or 5 miles a day, average. Sometimes 10 or 12.
So it's really not unusual because you do a good bit of running and then you come and teach and play some tennis.
Yeah. Well, the only difference Saturday was I was running as hard as I could.
Yeah.
Which is all-out effort.
What did you do Saturday night? Did you go bowling?
Didn't dance any. I sat and watched mostly.
The small town of Biola Battery was packed to its limit as thousands of people poured in from all over the state to see this year's blessing of the fleet. For the fishermen here, it's a traditional ceremony to give thanks for their good fortune and to receive a blessing for the future. But there's more to it than that. Prizes are given for the most beautifully decorated boat, and the boat owners go all out to win.
Yeah, we decorated like we started yesterday morning at 8 o'clock, and we decorated, slept through the night to finish it. None of us has been asleep.
Do you plan on doing it like this, for years, as long as you're here?
Just forever, as long as we live.
Why?
Well, because it's fun, and I think it should be did. And the more competition it is, the better it is, too. It just brings a lot of people. You meet a lot of good people. Just a lot of fun.
Along with the decorations, there was plenty of good seafood, and oh yes, plenty of good eating to go with it. After the crowning of the 1978 fleet maid, Regina Allen, the crowd was ready for the blessing of the fleet with Bishop John May of Mobile. Once the ceremony was completed with the sinking of a memorial wreath, the bishop led almost 100 boats in a ride down the bayou into the Mississippi Sound. And this is where the rain caught up with us this year. Decorations were drenched along with hundreds of onlookers, including the bishop himself. But I suppose a blessing goes a long way in drawing out dampened spirits. In Biola Battery, Janet Hall, News Center 5.
Changes that I think will streamline our ability to perform the functions of city government. With the departure of General Gillum as Director of Public Safety, it follows naturally that those functions under the Director of the Department of Public Safety, and I think logically so, and have thought so for some time, that those functions should flow directly to in the line chart, in the organizational chart, to the mayor. I've discussed this with both the chiefs, fire chief, the police chief, and they're both here. Should any questions be raised that they would need to speak to. I think that over a period of time that it has evolved that the way we're operating now, since the maintenance department, which is really the maintenance and the construction division of the city of Montgomery, has been under the operational control of the mayor, we've been able to get a great deal more done because of the direct supervision, the direct interest, and the direct efforts. In that regard, it is, in my judgment then, it follows that the engineering department, which has for some time been operating with direct line of communication to the mayor, because in the interest of speed and efficiency, we have used the engineering department in conjunction with the maintenance department to the end that we're getting our streets widened and resurfaced, our ditches worked on and so forth, by virtue of having this ability and flexibility to move with some degree of dispatch. And as an adjunct of that, the traffic engineering department working with the engineering department and the maintenance department to the end that as soon as work is done, signalization can be completed and taken care of. Along this line, let me point out briefly, Mr. President and ladies and gentlemen of the council, that in the 1978 budget, we saved some $92,000, $92,877 by elimination of the Public Information Office, the Management and Evaluation Office, and the Director of Public Services Office. These functions were eliminated and assumed under the workload of the mayor. In this year's budget, which will be coming up very shortly, Budget message will be presented on August the 15th. Without giving the exact figures that somebody could multiply back and tie together with figures, I would say to you that the savings, the net savings, without reflecting a change that will be reflected in the 1979 budget, another savings of personnel and manpower, that the net savings will be $100 and some odd $1,000, less than $105,000, but over $100,000 in this coming year's budget by virtue of the elimination of the 3 posts that I had just mentioned, plus the Director of Public Safety. This will be the net after the inclusion of the administrative assistant to the mayor. So we are consolidating, in my judgment, cutting out some positions that were nice, that were luxurious, were good, served a great purpose, but to get it in a more efficient operation. And as I have said many times, I work hard and I expect those around me to work hard, and we can do the job with less money. Save the city over $100,000 in this year's budget with that position already included. And Jack Hogg and I don't mind, and department heads don't mind, and hours don't mean anything to us. So with that, I would be prepared to answer any questions that anybody might have. Mainly in the areas is we had a little meeting this morning. If the council in its pleasure goes along with this proposed change, Reese McKinney, who is in the Planning and Director Department, will be the one named. He is tentatively named to that spot now. We had a discussion today of the primary zones of Mr. Hogg and Mr. McKinney. Each person in my office will know how to pitch, catch, and play first base. Everybody can cover for each other, but you'll have a primary zone and a secondary zone.